Man, today is a special day. I like that we look like a ladder. Let me fix that so we don't look like a ladder today. Uh, man, today is a very very special day. It is the dawn of a new show, and we call this common ground. Of self-determination, man. And I am very, very happy to have these brothers in here with me, man. And we're gonna introduce ourselves, but it's just been a labor of love, and I just really, really appreciate and respect these brothers. This is Omar Yanar and David Castillo, and I'm Charles Cole. Let's just go around the horn real quick and just tell people who we are. David, let's start with you, brother. The floor is yours. Tell these people who you are, and yeah, I want to hear about you, and I want to hear about this collar, B, because you got the chest out today. I love it.
Yeah. Got the Wyavette on. First off, Charles, Dr. Cole, thank you for bringing us all together. Really excited about this new show. We've been talking about it for a while, so I'm glad it's finally come together. Excited to be here with Omar Yanar too, new friend. So I'm David Castillo. I'm a educator and school leader and systems leader, mainly in Oakland, in the San Francisco Bay Area for the last about 20 years. From Southern California. I'm a first generation college student in my family. My parents come from Texas, where Omar is at now. So we have that connection. My parents were farm workers, moved to California in the late 1960s. And we'll get into it in the show, but via the power of education and hard work, we're able to transform our family within one generation. So I'm glad to be here with you all.
Man, that's beautiful, man. That's beautiful, man. Oh man, brother, it's so good to see you, man. We did some stuff before, man, and you're just a powerhouse, man. Why don't you let these people know who you are?
Man, thank you. Hey, it's been a long time since Oakland, man. It's been a long time since we've actually seen anybody. So
no.
Just to recapitulate this, Doc is amazing. If y'all don't know, Dr. Charles Cole is just a magnanimous human being. I'm honored to be part of this. And y'all don't know yet, but David Castillo is going to be hitting the national circuit with soon. One of the most enlightened carnales that I've had the opportunity of meeting. And I'm honored to be with him as well. When we got this started, it was a conversation about like who we are and what we're trying to accomplish. And I think what we realized is that, like I know everyone's got a podcast and stuff, but David, Charles, and I felt like no one was talking about these issues. So this podcast, what we'll discuss in a second, is an incredible opportunity to just have real talk, not filtered, and an opportunity to have the audience really understand what are some of the impending issues that we have racially and educationally in this country. So a little like David, like I've been marred in this since the beginning, much like Charles. Both my parents are immigrants from Mexico. My dad's Lebanese, like straight up. My grandparents straight came from Lebanon, so he's like a double immigrant. Didn't speak, the language, had to learn Spanish, had to learn English, had to immigrate to the United States. Same with my mom. My mom grew up in Segundo Barrio. She became a teacher. And ultimately, I grew up under the premonition of these two ideologies, which is, in this country, no one's going to give you a damn thing. So ultimately, you've got to be able to navigate and understand a very complex system, my mom, and education, and literally almost meld it to your will. My father was a restaurateur, like my mom. Like I said, my mom was a teacher. And ultimately, I kind of synthesized the two. So I started my career as a teacher. I'm now the founder, CEO, and superintendent of one of the only Latino-led public charter schools in the country, the Basso Leadership Academy. We are straight up culturally conscious and have been for 6 years now, when no one was talking about being culturally conscious. So I'm excited that that's part of the conversation. But we're talking about things that my boy Andrew Benitez, who helped start the school with us, he's learning at Harvard. We're straight up doing it. So I'm honored to be part of this conversation, to have some real talk about systemic change.
Man, I love hearing that, man. And I guess I should say a little bit about who I am. But and David, I don't know if you mentioned that you have started schools and did that stuff as well. Like I just wanted to, I've made sure I surrounded myself by people that not only just care about education, not only just care about Black kids and brown kids, but got the data, got the numbers, got the results to show for it in the labors of love. So you want to listen to these cats because they've done it and they've done the work and they continue to do the work. It's funny because we were having this conversation on A Black Hands about what's the work, because sometimes people just use that, but y'all can actually define it. So you can define your work. My name is Charles, and I was born in the Chicago area, but I grew up in Oakland. I'm an Oakland dude, and I've just, like a lot of people, I've seen the best of this country and the worst of this country, and meaning that I grew up homeless. Both my parents were in and out of jail. Drugs was a big thing, the same way it was for a lot of folks. And as we build out this show, and we're talking about our common ground for self-determination, like that is my whole thing. I care about self-determination. I wear it on my chest every day, right? Like it's said on here somewhere. My love language is self-determination. Like that's all I kind of care about, because I gotta believe that I got some type of, there's a way that I can play a role in the outcome of my life. If there is no way, if I just gotta depend on racist people no longer being racist, or systems just magically start working in our favor, then just take me out. I don't want to play that game. Put me on the corner somewhere. You know what I'm saying? Let me be high until I die. And you know what I'm saying? If my life is already ordered by these other people. So, I am somebody who has always tried to, push the system to be better, hold systems accountable, while at the same time preparing my people and equipping my people with, the bear killing type of tools and weapons that they need to get up out the forest or whatever forest they're struggling with. And so, I'm just happy to be doing this with you brothers. And, I'm blessed. I get to do this with the A Black Hands. I get to do this in other spaces. But what's special about this for me is, I talk a lot about Black liberation and Black folks. And, y'all, we have a California Latino person and a Texas Latino person. And there are some differences there. You know what I'm saying? And what does it look like if Black and brown folks was actually talking about this together and having these conversations? And I cover a lot of topics, but this is not the show. Not with men. This is not the show I've seen. I got to give a shout out to my homegirl, Mary Moran, who's from Oakland, who's now doing work in New Orleans, and she's Afro-Latina. So she definitely talks about Black and brown a lot. But I haven't necessarily seen one outside of the great work she's doing, where it's like, yo, me and a few of my friends, and we really about to chop it up. And I'm looking forward to learning, fellas. So, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. So, let's just jump right in it, man. I kind of talked about that a little bit, but, I kind of said my piece around why we started, but, and listen, I know we knew with each other or whatever, man, but this ain't a panel. People gonna have their turn to talk, but we talking over each other in this thing, man. So let's just start out. Like, why did we start this show? And Omar, I'll let you kick it off, but, David, kick in, you know what I'm saying? Let's like, why do we feel like this show is important?
I think what I've realized is that people have a construct of what education is based on their own educational experience. And when I start diving into the history of education and why public education started, people are mesmerized to find out the origins of public education, to find out the veil, to realize, like, how did education transform itself in the 1940s and 50s for very systemic purposes and in a very purpose-driven way to ensure that some succeeded and many others did not. So those basics are things that I found many people didn't even know about. And, of course they didn't, because those things are purposely left out of our history books. Like Dave and I were talking about this, like, what kind of history are we teaching our kids? And why is it so censored? And that is done purposely. And I'm not going to make any reservations about that. So stemming from the basics of why public education is the way it is, why it is inherently rooted in institutionalized racism, then transcends into a hopefully like what we're all striving for, which is like a post-racial reality. That's what we're working towards. It's kind of like Doc said, like, we want to get to a place where race doesn't matter, but we better care a whole lot about what's going on with race to get to that place. And we need to have that conversation. So then it became, where are the incredible parallels that Black and brown have in their trajectory in the United States, in their experience educationally, and then ultimately like where we all wind up. And like the commonalities are absolutely striking, and yet we continue to fight with one another, and we continue to allow others to dictate and narrate our narrative instead of putting out our narrative ourselves. So no longer are we going to allow other people to present on our behalf. We're coming correct. And this podcast, and this is an opportunity to hear directly from individuals who are actually doing the work. Because oftentimes what we hear, and David agrees and the doc agrees, like you're hearing narration from people that haven't taught a day in their life, that have not led schools, that have not led efforts, that have no idea what's going on systemically with Black and brown kids in this country, and particularly low income Latinx and Black kids in this country. So this is an opportunity for us to shoot the bull, but it's an opportunity to hopefully bring awareness and activism to our audience so that they can say, all right, cool, like I got this information, what now? And we want to help.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting time that we're launching this show, right in the midst of this debate around critical race theory. And I understand what critical race theory is. I studied it in college a bit. But I think more importantly, like I've lived critical race theory before it was called critical race theory. My parents lived critical race theory before it was called critical race theory. And thinking about like their experiences going back to the 1940s and the 50s in South Texas, attending segregated schools, going to school with Black children. You had the Black and brown schools. And then you had the white schools all within the same school district, right? It was just commonplace. That's how it worked. And then eventually, we worked towards desegregating our schools. And I think eventually in a future show, we should start talking about this movement towards integration. But going back to the desegregation of schools, you still have the historical impacts of redlining. And so like we might be attending the regular school where we live, but they're still under-resourced, and that was my experience growing up. I attended under-resourced public schools from kindergarten through 12th grade. For a couple of my years, I attended a public school quite literally across the tracks, which was the freeway, in a more affluent community, and it was just a totally different experience. Not a positive one for me, but a better resource school. And so, moving through my K-12 trajectory. It was just like, I was doing work. I was moving through curriculum. I was questioning it, but not until I got to junior college, probably my first or second year of junior college, community college, did I pick up a textbook and actually saw my history written in a book, in a course that I could enroll for credits of United States history through a Chicano perspective. And that's where it all started for me. And so I think part of the show we wanted to do is lift up some of the work that's happening in our schools now around cultural empowerment, around ethnic studies. It's a big topic right now. And for me, it's always been part of my life. It's been part of my educational experience. When I was at the high school in Oakland that we founded, Oakland Unity High School, in the early 2000s, ethnic studies was a thing. It wasn't mandated, but we created our own curriculum. We were using Howard Zinn and other, critical texts to kind of juxtaposition the standard Houghton Mifflin U.S. history textbook that we were forced to purchase, right? So we were doing the work early on. And I think both for myself and Omar, we have receipts to prove it. Kids were achieving, they were learning, they were graduating, they were going to college. So I'm excited about having some real talk.
Man, I think that's the big piece too, right? And you said it around the real talk. I agree with both of you. I think this is the other thing, man. I think us having this conversation, like you're gonna get some education, you're gonna get some history, you're gonna hear us like wax poetic about the type of work we do and how we care about kids and our people. But also you're gonna hear some direct talk. You're gonna hear some like, yo, this is what I'm focused on with my people, and this is what these people focused on. And you're gonna hear some people, get addressed. You're gonna hear some issues get addressed in an unapologetic way. You know what I'm saying? I'm so tired of seeing black men, brown men castrated in this type of work and having to dumb down conversations and nicen them up to make other people feel comfortable when we're supposed to be talking about our kids. You know what I'm saying? Like, all of us are educated and doing this work. And one of the things in my research that I saw was like, you know, when kids have teachers that don't understand who they are, we can talk about critical race theory and all that stuff. Let me just say this, because this is getting to the White House and everything. And I'm on board. All of us are on board. But this is not a conversation that happens in my barbershop. This is not a conversation that's happening with my neighbors, right? They would just say the truth. Like, we just want your history books to tell the truth. Like, so stop telling kids that Christopher Columbus, like, you know what I'm saying, sailed the ocean blue, you know what I'm saying, and whatever, and discovered this country when there were already people there. Stop telling people that, oh, well, these people stayed indentured servants and some slaves were happy and this, that, and the third, or whatever the case is. Stop telling people, you know what I'm saying, that, well, you know, we just incorporated all these states or whatever. No, you mean California? Like, you know what I'm saying? You mean like San Antonio, like those San Francisco, right? Like, no, man, we took that shit. You know what I'm saying? And I think that this show is like, yo, and then as we start out with a simple baseline of the truth unapologetically, because let's be really honest, this is why I care about this show. Similar to the 8 Black Hands, which is 4 black men. What does it look like if you got brown men and black men actually standing up and coming into these spaces? Because I tell you what, it's a lot of our women that lead in education. It's a lot of our women that are out front. And David has seen this in Oakland. They tend to get disrespected. You add 2 men to that mix, it's a whole different conversation when we show up to a board meeting. It's an entirely different thing. So I am interested and curious around, as I am dealing with liberation for my people and what I'm thinking about. I'm curious of what my Latino folks are thinking about, because, and we're going to have some tough discussions. I'm one of them people like, look, we ain't fixed our stuff yet. Like, so, yo, black people, we got to learn who we are. We got to learn our history. We got to be able to do that stuff, know what we are, do our own work, and then we can show up with brown folks, Asian folks, or whomever, you know what I'm saying? And you know, and I want to have some different discussions, like even in Oakland, the politics, right? The way that Latino folks have embraced charter schools, moving schools, doing a bunch of stuff a lot easier and differently than black folks. And there are some reasons for that, right? Good and bad, but I've seen it work out. You just mentioned Unity. Unity is one of the top performing schools in that city. You know what I mean? And so I'm just really interested in having some real talk, man. So, you know, I didn't mean to get overhyped that fast already. You feel me? But
that's what the show's all about. Like, I love it.
Do you know? But that's what we're gonna do, man. Listen, man. We ain't on no TED Talk panel. We ain't in some cookie cutter, like, you know what I'm saying, conference.
In the back was all about the TED Talk, man. I was gonna pull out some, like, I don't know, some good ass cognac over here. I thought I was gonna pull that shit out.
I'm gonna start this thing called Tyrone Talks, man. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna bring the soul back. I remember when TED Talk started out, and it had a lot more flavor. Now I feel like, you know what I'm saying, it's like, you know, a little different. No hate, no shade to that space. But I want to create a space that's different, that feels different, and where the people that we care about in our life that don't work in education, right, can come, pull up, and be a part of this conversation. Like, come on, man. You ain't talking to your friends outside of education about talk. On this show, we're going to talk like y'all in the back having a Corona, putting some meat on the grill, and what the hell is going on in these places. I don't have time for that other shit. Like, I just don't. Like, and the people that I care about don't care about it. Like, you know what I'm saying? And so, and I got a video coming out that's talking about the CRT thing, and I lay it out for people that I care about, that they would care to follow, like what this actually means, but also more so what they can do about it. You feel me? Like, and so we just got some comments. Bill Conrad said the right focuses on a white supremacist colorblind. Yeah, man, they always gonna do that. Listen, like, these are the things that we're gonna combat. And listen, just because we done cleaned up, just because we done got out the forest, I'm gonna have to show that cartoon a little later. But just because we've gotten out the forest or whatever, don't mean we can't still hear those screams and those cries from our people that's in it, man. And I refuse on a platform that we paid for, that we built, that we Amazon and stuff has arrived yesterday to make this show happen today. I refuse to have us muzzle ourselves. And my community will say, you know, they didn't tell us to even, like, when I see my people going to the back of the bus on their own or going to the back door on their own, we not doing that. We showing up in the front, sitting wherever the hell we want to sit because we've earned this spot. Like, y'all are two amazing cats. Let me stop, man. Y'all would get me talking this whole.
Let me share a little piece about California. There are about just over 6 million students enrolled in California public schools, right? As of last year, 55% of those children are Hispanic, Latino, Latina. Okay, so that's like almost 3.5 million. That is a massive number of young people that are in just our public systems today. And so why do I bring that up? I bring that up because they all come from different parts of the world. Some of us are native Californians. Some of us come from Mexico. Some of us come from Central America. Some of us come from other parts of the United States. And I think, again, going back to my origin story, when I was really turned on to education, when my light bulb really went off, is when I had an instructor, it happened to be a college professor that looked like me, talk to me and engage me in an actual academic conversation about my history. And so, I think one thing that we'll talk about on the show is given the numbers in California, in Texas, across this whole country, there is a common thread between Latino students and African American students, young people, and the importance of them knowing their history, their family history, their ancestry, where they come from, the anecdotes, the storytelling, and then as well as coupled by the larger, broader, like political history. The combination of those two things can, if done well, and I think if done by the right people, can provide a grounding for young people then to go off into the world and find common ground with other groups. But you have to be on solid ground, first as an individual, as a family, as a community, to then go out and do the work of building bridges, in my opinion.
I couldn't agree more. I'll go off on a very quick story that I think addresses like white supremacist tropes and directly addresses oral history from our elders. When public education started in the United States, the ideology was really simple. We're going to educate Native Americans. And by educate, what we're going to do is take Native Americans away from their tribes, away from their families, away from their culture, away from their religion, away from their home. We're going to purposely indoctrinate them with our culture, which is essentially white middle-class Protestant culture, which is the dominant culture. So let's just get that right out on Front Street. That is the dominant culture that cultivates all the social norms in the United States. We're going to teach them that. We're going to eradicate their language, and they're going to eradicate their religion, and they're going to, worship essentially white Protestant religious beliefs. Christ. They're going to wipe out the entirety of their history. So much so that we're just going to essentially eradicate these folks to the point where I am not lying. A friend of mine on the phone yesterday was telling me that she grew up in New York and she was like in an honors history class, and her honors history teacher basically said, yeah, there really aren't any Native Americans anymore because they all essentially died of alcoholism because they couldn't get their act together. So
man, that's how they get you, man.
So that's what I'm saying. When I hear bullshit tropes like we're gonna do this race blind situation, public education wasn't race blind when it started. It was a systemic eradication of the Native American culture to essentially assimilate them. So is anyone wondering why we're so emphatic about oral histories and teaching about our ancestries, both black and brown, going back to indigenous folks, going back to the Toltecs, the Mayans, the Aztecs, going into African American history, going back to African history? It's because those things have been systemically eradicated from public education on purpose in order to create a false narrative. So I'm with you on talking about these things, but for all the folks who think, this is all BS, you're just a conspiracy theorist. No, I'm a historian.
Right.
And I know my history
A well-educated historian.
And so, you said this, but I think you're segueing right into a perfect conversation, right? What does liberation mean for us and for our respective communities? Because again, right, I'm a part of a Black community. Like what you just said, what that the trope around Native Americans and alcoholism. I'm from the crack era. You know what I'm saying? I was born in the 80s. Like I watched what drugs did in my family, to my friends, and I'm not. Everybody that I grew up with was impacted by this mode, right? And you can say, well, some Black folks just need to get their act together. But again, as NWA said so poignantly, you know what I'm saying? We ain't got ships. We wasn't able to ship in stuff. And I say this a lot. I said this in one of my talks, man, and people, you know, had a chuckle, but you got to think about it. You say that we dumb and we don't know this stuff and we can't do math and we can't do science. But then you say, well, but these people turn cocaine into crack and stretched it. That's science for your ass. Which one is it? Like we can't be both. And I think that like, so I am not interested in the safe kind of like punk ass conversation that everybody's having where they using big words, where they trying to make themselves sound smarter and they trying to make simple things sound a lot more complicated. Okay. The purpose of education in countries is to bring them into the fold and say, look, you are now a part of this cloth. This is what we need you to know and understand. In this country, you need a proletariat. You need a people, right? Like you need lower paid workers in order for our system to thrive. So it does not be, that's why you don't teach entrepreneurship in schools. That's why they don't teach you money management in schools, because I need workers. You know what I'm saying? But if I'm come from wealth, the schools don't have to teach me that. One, because the public schools don't have to teach me that because my rich people put me in private schools. And two, that wealth and knowledge passes down through generations. So if we're going to talk about it, let's talk about it, because unless we having these conversations, all three of us have gotten caught up in these stupid, silly charter district conversations. And it's the thing, it ain't about that if we having the right conversation, because I don't love none of these systems. The issue is, and what liberation is for me, is for my yes to mean yes and my no's to mean no. It means that I can raise my kids however the hell I want to raise them. It means life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What liberation means for me is finding the history of mine that was erased and taken away. I had to fight in a doctoral program to do oral histories around oral history is an African tradition. It is an Aztec tradition. It is a native tradition. Everybody outside of this place has utilized oral histories and storytelling to pass history on. And when you are from an enslaved community like I am, when that's all you got, I can't go 20 generations back and find my people. You know what I'm saying? So if we're going to talk about it, let's talk about it. But liberation for me is that you either give me these things, my government either works for me, or I make some changes, and at the very least, you allow me to fight for the things and the values that this country has promised me and said that I can fight for, even though they didn't promise me, because my black ass was not recognized when that was happening. Your brown ass was not recognized when that was happening. You were something to conquer. We were something to be utilized to build this country off the back of. You know what I'm saying? So liberation for me at this point now is knowing that I deserve better and I will take better if you don't give it. So in the words of the great Beanie Siegel, you're going to either get down or you're going to lay down. But I'm going to let you brothers jump in, man.
Yeah, I mean, you could wait around all day to have government, work for you, or you can, figure out, like many of us have, through different means to I wouldn't say manipulate, but figure out how to really how to force government to work for us. And we have the tools because, we're all, pretty well educated on this panel. But in terms of the liberation piece, for me, the first piece of liberation is going back. And so we're setting the foundation in this first show. And so the idea of liberation for me means that you're free in terms of your history. You understand your history. You understand it so well, where your family came from, where your abuelos and abuelitas came from, where your ancestors came from. You know how your people moved. You know their histories, their language, and you know how you ended up, in Oakland, California, right? I live in California, which is part of Aztlan. It's the birthplace of the Aztec people, the Mexica. You know, so I never left. I've always been home, and I know my history. And so since I know my history, you know, I could be on the corner with the dollar in my pocket, and I'm still standing firmly on my ground. Fortunately, that's not my situation. But I think that's the first part of liberation, is really knowing your history, knowing your story, and being grounded and rooted in that, as you then turn around to figure out how you can help liberate other people through education, through other means, right? It's a struggle. And I think that's also another area where, you know, we have common ground with African Americans and Latinos, you know, just around the importance of understanding our rich history. We have a shared history.
Yeah, very much so. Very eloquently put. So I'm just going to kind of stem from what David said. I think it in a dyad. There's individual liberation, and I think there's collective. And to put it very simply, liberation of self has so much to do with doing things for yourself instead of for others. And like, look, let's be honest here. Like, we live in this like Instagram society. How many decisions are based on what other people think of you, or what other people think like is right? And where did that stem from? Like, who are they? And who made up all these like bullshit paradigms of like what's okay and what's not, and what's cool and what's attractive? No one has really began to like deconstruct it. And we think liberation from self has so much to do with an inner discovery of self that has so much to do with what David said. It's like understanding your background, your ancestry, but ultimately my hope is that your purpose. What are we here to do? And I think that that becomes a very beautiful sentiment, except it's very difficult to practice that sentiment without the latter, which is the collective liberation, which is very simply being able to do things at an equitable way as everybody else. So I'll give you a great example, and I'll call them out. Here in El Paso, we bank with a certain organization, and I'm not going to name the name of that bank. We're like one of the only like true like Latino clients. It's an 85% Latino town. 85% of El Paso is Latino, yet 95% of the loans go towards white folks. That is not an equitable opportunity. To be liberated, I think, doesn't have to do just simply with oneself. It has to do with the equity of opportunity that is being granted to folks in this country. Education is not equal. Bank loans are not equal. Mortgages are not equal. Hell, I had a professor at school. We did this entire analysis. They were FBI folks, and they did this entire analysis of racial disparities in working and garnering mortgages. And that's a real nice way of saying Black people walked into an apartment complex and told there were straight up no apartments. And then the FBI agents who were white walked in and were told they had 27 different apartments readily available. It's being told you can't get a bank loan because your last name is Yanar or Gutierrez or Salomon. But, you know, Mr. Ross walks in and, oh, of course, absolutely. So someone was saying that wealth is not the ultimate determinant of success, and I would agree with that. But as Charles Cole said, if you've got an inordinate amount of wealth behind you and your parents are teaching you these things, what you've got is not only that, but social capital. You know how to navigate a very complex system. To be liberated in the United States not only has to be a scenario where you know thyself, but you certainly know what thy is working with. And what thy is, in this case, are the constructs of white middle-class society. And if you do not know how to navigate them, you can be liberated as all you want individually, but how are you going to achieve that systemic liberation for yourself and for our brothers and sisters?
Yep. Yeah, and it feels like that's where. Thank you for that, Omar. It feels like that's where the what we're talking about in the space is the role that different education systems play. Right? We've got private schools, we've got public charter schools, we've got public schools, we've got home schools, we've got all different kinds of like schooling configurations. And so, how do people, how do people like us? How do people that have achieved a certain level of education and understand the importance of, like, I didn't have to go back into education, but I actually did have to. After college, I was working, in the first like .com boom in San Francisco, making very good money, had a very comfortable lifestyle. And one day I just woke up and said, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to go back and use my experience, use my liberation to help other young people like me. And so, I quit a job that I had for a high tech company, and enrolled in a teacher education program, and that was like 25 years ago. And so, I think figuring out how more people like us can, be steered into working in different facets of education, whether that be teaching, whether that be school leadership. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity. We're still, even in a state like California, even in a town like Oakland, I'll give you some statistics. In Oakland, more than half of the students in our school district are Latino, Latina, right? It's about 55% maybe. Only about 15 to 20% of our teachers reflect that demographic. So you have a huge gap between like who's in our schools and who's teaching the children in our schools, right?
Right.
And we talk about teaching for liberation, teaching ethnic studies, like just being a good human being that can like wrap their head around the experiences that these young people have. It's really challenging when you have a big disconnect between the staff, the adults that work in the building versus the children that attend those schools. So I'll leave that there.
Man, well, you know what I mean, and this is going to dovetail into our conversation about the role that education plays. But before we get there, I want to just take some time out and just thank everybody. We got a lot of people from a lot of places, for everybody from LinkedIn, everybody from Facebook, from Twitch. I got people from my Twitch community here, from Twitter, all that good stuff, man. And I just want to shout these people out by name too. Just some of these people that's been tweeting, that's been posting. Ryan, Toya, Bill, Ray is on here, and Ray, as my 8 Black Hands brother, you always welcome on this show anytime, man. Dr. Stephanie is going in from LinkedIn right now. We appreciate you. And if you and Tanae and Vicky, thank you so much. And if you appreciate this conversation, we need you to comment, we need you to like, but we also need you to share it, right? Like the way we'll be able to expand these type of conversations is by people like you, people that like want to have these truths and have these conversations. Because this is the thing, man. Like we have had such safe conversations. Every time we say they are killing us, they get somebody else, usually a Black person or a brown person, to make up a nicer word, to make up something else that makes it easier to digest, so we don't have to call the thing. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, well, that's just an unconscious bias. Like, and my friend Marilyn, when my doctoral program would say, they was wide awake when they did that shit. Like, it's not like, you know what I mean? So there was no unconsciousness there, right? And I think that like part of this is us being able to have this conversation. So keep it coming, keep commenting, we'll keep putting it up and keep including you in this conversation, even if you don't agree. Like, let's have these conversations and push each other, and you can push us as people that's listening. This has to be a communal space, so we can actually have these talks that we need to. So David, we were about to just kind of dive into what's the role that education should play in this, man? Like, we talking about this stuff, we talking about these inequities, we talking about the way that we might get treated or whatever. I don't want to leave people feeling like they victims. I don't want to leave people feeling like, well, damn, I'm here, I'm stuck in it. And I also want to acknowledge, and y'all have to I got to deal with this in different ways, but probably not as much as you, because you get to go back to your country. You get to go back and see people and have people. And there are some people that might be like, I don't know what you bitching about. You in America. People die, right? People risk their lives every single day. Black people, brown people from all over the country, all over the diaspora to get to this place because of what it represents. So I want to also just acknowledge that, right? We can, to them, they'll probably be like, you complaining, I don't know what you complaining about. We got a warlord that's in our neighborhood. We got child soldiers here. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. But David, what role, after everything we done said and built up, man, what role should education be playing, bruh?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a perfect world, education can and should, and we need to push on education systems to be the great equalizer. I hope that word doesn't trigger people, but I think the great equalizer in terms of it, and it's a balance. Like we've seen in education spaces. I'll just focus on where we are right now. A movement around educating low-income Black and Brown children in a particular type of educational model. Like in the charter school sector, the no excuses thing that has come and gone, right? We've seen large districts that serve large numbers of African American and Latino students, and their actual like academic performance, might get mixed in with white and Asian students. And so you could look at a district and say, oh, the district is generally doing well as a whole. But when you dig into the data, Black and Brown students are not successful. In California, we know that Black and Brown children consistently year over year perform, far behind their Asian and white peers. That's what the data tells us. So I think we have a tremendous amount of work to actually improve the basics around what schools are teaching. I'm talking basic English language arts, basic science, basic social science, basic mathematics, but also taking on this new challenge of providing a rigorous and a thoughtful, ethnic studies curriculum where all students can actually see themselves embedded in the curriculum. I think that's the real work and the real balance that our school systems need to take on going forward, at least one of them.
That's what's up. You can go ahead. Oh.
No, I mean, look, I'm Dave and I are like super aligned on this, but let me take a step back.
Mm-hmm.
First, let me just ask everybody listening in, and even ourselves. This is a question my professor at school, Professor Kay Merseth, huge shout out to her, posed to everybody in the class, and it's like, what's the purpose of education? Three of us, highly educated, I bet we have radically different answers. Mm-hmm. We ask everyone listening in right now what they think, we're going to get wildly different answers. So I think that first, we need to acknowledge that I don't think there's like a central ideology of what like education should be. But I can tell you a little bit about what education was. And I kind of want to dive into that just for a second. Look, after the whole Native American thing and assimilation, they figured, hey, this system seems pretty great. Why don't we keep it going? But you know what we really need? We need workers. And straight up what Doc was talking about, what David was talking about. We need workers. We don't need independent thinkers. We need folks to go into these factories and build things. And that was important in World War II. It is actually what established a large-scale African-American and brown middle class in the United States. The fact that we had like stable jobs. The education, however, was really meant to do three things. Give everybody at least the sixth grade education so that they had enough math and enough reading skills to work on the factory floor. If you succeeded past this gauntlet that is public education to the high school level, whoo, holy smokes, your management. How the hell did you survive? You need to be running shit. You graduated and oh my God, went to college? You should be running the factory. You should be running these businesses. It was literally a gauntlet. And that is how it was purposely created. Just like the doc said, they were wide awake when they created this shit. Yeah. They were wide awake when they created this system. And now what's going on is you hear all this like bullshit rhetoric. I hate it. Where it's like, everyone needs coding. We got to teach coding. I'm all for it. I'm all for teaching coding, but you think that's going to be the panacea? You think that's going to solve everything? All coding is teaching kids the new factory work. You're just creating workers. Mm-hmm. And the problem with that, just like Doc said, that we're not teaching entrepreneurship skills is because God forbid a Black and brown person would garner the opportunity to actually run an organization. I mean, I bet people are thinking themselves right now, oh my God, Omar is running a school. Yep. Running multiple schools. Yep. Running an organization. Yep. That's what's up. Because we're going to unveil the truth to our students. So how do I think education solves this problem? I think it's not just about what we were previously discussing, which is to help liberate the minds individually of our students, but to help them understand the systemic racist issues that exist in this country and equip them with the skill sets to go out there, combat them, fight them, and make it better. Because to circle right back to what the doc said, I am very blessed to be part of the United States. We are not in a war-torn, dictatorship-driven country. We almost were. Fucking straight up coup on this capital in this country. So we were real close. Trevor Noah talks about it all the time and the radical similarities. But I am elated to be part of this country. And when people are like, yo, Omar, what's your beef with America? You don't love America? And I was like, no, I love it so much. We should be what everyone in this world aspires to be, a free and liberated country with equity for all, because I believe in the ideology of what we can be and will fight to the death to make America the most equitable country in the world. And for those of you sitting back and saying, we're perfect, we got nothing to do, yo, you must be the beneficiary. And good for you.
I would say I'm gonna agree and I'm gonna push, right? I'm gonna agree and I'm gonna push, and this is what I would say with it. I'm gonna have us all level on this one as I say this, right? You know, again, we look like a ladder again. Hold on, let me
do what you gotta do.
You know, we just gonna raise your laptop up next time, David.
I like the with spares thing that we got going.
I know it's like
I got it, man. I gotta stay low to the ground. I don't know what's gonna happen.
We look like reading levels, right? But what I'm gonna say, here's what I would say, right? I agree with what you're saying. I agree with what you're saying. But what I would push on, right? And what I would say around that is, what you asking for is asking the car to be a plane, bro. If you asking for education, that's my neighbor. I'm in the middle of a show right now, but I will come back and see you. My neighbor outside.
You got shout outs in the middle of the show?
No, yeah. I'm getting shout outs, baby. We doing, you know, it's the springtime. But what I'm saying is, if you asking for schools and expecting schools to teach critical thinking skills, you might as well be asking a Honda Civic to be able to ride across the water, fam. This is not a country that's looking for equity. This is a country that's looking to build an empire. And when you have an empire, you need people to have certain understandings. You need to have workers or whatever. So there are things that we can do. There are things that you have to understand the game that you playing. If I come in and I invite you to play poker at my house, and I'm playing Texas Hold'em and you playing Go Fish, we got a whole different, and because it's my board and I control it, you might think, hey man, you got two pair, you got this, you got whatever. Can I get a two of diamonds? Yeah, bro, you can have a two of diamonds, bro. Go ahead. And we're gonna take all your money and all your resources. All right. And so what I'm saying is, this is what education is doing and what it shouldn't be doing. If you black or brown, it's two things. It's either totally fucking failing you, which means that you might end up living in squalor, which means you might have to end up living as the proletariat. And listen, there is nothing wrong with a factory job, okay? There is nothing wrong with having good, decent work. We come from black and brown families where you got that post office job, bro. You got benefits. You good. You in that. Like, so I don't want anybody to take it that way. And the other side is, you do really well, and then you got to lose a part of yourself. You do really well, and there's this achievement tax that attacks your psyche. There's this thing that's like, well, Omar, what does Omar have to leave to go to Howard? I mean, to go to Harvard. Howard, I mean, it would have been kind of lit if you went to Howard, to the black college, you know what I'm saying? But what does O have to go through to become that Harvard student? And how is his people looking at him when he go back home? What does David actually need to do to be successful? Or Charles, you got all that book smart, that book knowledge, right? So it's like a double-edged sword, and it's making people choose. And it's like, you can be with us or you can be this. And it's building this false dichotomy there. I'm gonna show this cartoon. You know what, y'all? I'm sorry, I'm gonna just take this liberty because I think all three of us can relate to the boy in this cartoon. And then I got a question for y'all right after. Are y'all okay with that, brother? I know I'm taking liberties, man.
No,
but
yeah, let's go.
I do want to address what you just said, because I know David's going to drop some knowledge. Let me quickly just say this, and then I want the cartoon's badass. I agree with so much of what you said. But as Murphy's Law says, you can't beat them, join them. Look,
Right.
Mama always said, Mama told me my magic shoes. Look, my mom always said, how about Peter's Law? If you can't beat them, join them, then beat them. David.
Absolutely. Oh, and let me just be true. Let me just, and I'm not, and that's not a bad thing on us. I'm just talking about the position that we get put in.
I couldn't agree more with that. And I think the difference is like, one, how are we liberated in ourselves to be confident to say, like, I haven't lost what I need in order to make a difference in this country, in order to make a difference for others. I'm like, yo, you want to call me a sellout or whatever because I went to Stanford and Harvard, like, yo, whatever. Like, that's, read some Don Miguel Ruiz. Like, you need to learn some Four Agreements. But like, what I'm getting at is, you have a poker game at your house and you create the rules. That's, a great metaphor for the United States. I snuck into your poker game.
Mm-hmm.
And not only did I just sneak into the poker game, I have, through a very systemic way, started rearranging the rules of that poker game. And I'm straight up winning. Now, will I get killed in the process? Maybe. Hasn't. That thought hasn't left my mind, and I'm being very serious about that. But David has also accomplished the same. So while I understand that this country is in need of these things and in need of workers, what I'm in need of is more Black and brown people in ownership positions through the realm of education in order to start making powerful decisions, because the people in power don't look like us. And I know the talk on our feed was just saying that. And the thing is, I know public education is struggling, and I don't know if every school can do all these things, but at least I'm going to try, and I'll die trying. And maybe I'm a martyr to the cause, but it's something worth living for.
Right. And that's why I want to show this cartoon, because I want to ask a question after it, because I think what you actually just tied to probably would end up being your answer. But basically, what does it take for people? We all come from a certain type of force. So I'm just curious, after you all see this, just what your thoughts. It's only a minute. This story is called The Forest, the Boy, and the Bear. There's this forest, and there's a bear terrorizing everyone in it. And he starts by chasing this group of kids. And one of the kids is running his little heart out, trying to outrun the bear. He knows he can't outrun this bear because kids are not as fast as bears. Bears are pretty damn fast. But then he realized something. He doesn't have to outrun the bear. He just has to outrun the people around him. So he does. And he can hear the people behind him, but he just keeps running. He can hear the bear growling at people, biting people. He can hear the footsteps of the bear behind him, but he just keeps running. So he finally makes it out of the forest. He's supposed to be safe, and he remembers every moment of life in that damn forest. He can see the faces of the people that he's passed, the folks he tried to pull along, all that stuff. So then the boy grows up, he gets bigger, he gets stronger, and he goes back to the forest with tools and weapons. The bear killing kind of tools and weapons. And he's looking to arm the other folks in that forest. Now, some people want his help, some don't. Some people are mad at him for leaving, others are proud. You get out the forest, but you keep hearing those footsteps everywhere you turn. No matter how many folks you equip, no matter how many times you go back, you hear that damn bear. So, fellas, so part of that, I want to know for you, what's your force and what's your bear? And I think that at the end of that video was exactly what you were saying. Oh, was this like, I think you talking about building the bear killing type of tools and weapons. So I just what's y'all's reactions to that? And you could be like, Charles, I ain't got a damn thing to do with my life. You can be completely honest. Well, I'm gonna start with David because David, tell me where you at with it, bro?
Yeah, thank you for sharing the video. I think the bear, haven't had a lot of time to process it, but I would say is just is oppression, right? Is like, living in an oppressive world, in an oppressive country. When you don't have the tools to be able to, what we were talking about earlier, like navigate, right? And so as we're moving through life, as you move through education, going back to the idea or the concept of being very well grounded, this idea of liberation, understanding your history, understanding your culture, having your feet very squarely on the ground, then we're able to move through, into the world of work to help liberate other people through different means, right? But I think we just need more. I know we need more brown and black folk across the board to be in just a whole number of different settings and leadership roles to do that work. But this work should never come at the cost of who you are. Right. And I know it does happen a lot. We see it a lot. People forget who they are, where they come from, and it's pretty evident, quickly, you notice it. But I think those two things, they're not separate things. I think you can remain well-grounded. You can remain a cultural warrior, and you can navigate higher education and Ivy League and different types of systems and school systems and corporate systems, keeping yourself intact.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
I love the video.
Well, thank you. Oh, I appreciate that.
It's metaphorical as shit, man. I love it. It's like, I think about this often. The forest is the dominant culture, and it is a forest. It is just a literal way of thinking about the world. And the bear is the systemic racism that exists in this country. And these things are chasing you. But when you're trapped in the cold and you can't actually see what the other options are, then, it isn't just about, for me, going down and getting the bear killing weapons. I'm grabbing a fucking axe and chopping down the forest. Mm-hmm. And what I'm doing is getting together with, to make it cliche, a rainbow coalition and planting a brand new forest. We cannot get to where we want to get to in this country if we do not understand the past and not understand how education has been used as a catalyst to perpetuate racism in this country. Right. So if we're going to start with education, I'm crazy. I believe it can be all the things. I believe we can teach the critical thinking. I believe we can teach the critical consciousness. I believe in teaching Howard Zinn. So someone talked about books. Not to sound cliche, but how about start with the New Jim Crow, Howard Zinn, and Caste. Those are three amazing books that will just absolutely reveal all the ingrained racist components of our society. And unless we're teaching our kids about how this exists and then what they can do to change it, how are we ever going to expect change?
Right.
Maybe we sit around and talk about it at your house, Charles, with poker, and that's badass, and I'd love to be there. But
we can do that, brother. I'm with
it. An army of people. It says not an army of black and brown alone, an army of students who are cognizantly aware of what this country is and are dreaming of what it should be and have the tool sets to make it what it is.
I think that's beautiful. I know we got to close out. I would just say this before we go into final thoughts. I don't think the system will ever do that. I think we can push them. It doesn't. Power does not seed itself. Okay, I just want to be very clear. It might give you tokens. It might make it look like it's seeding itself, but it will never seed itself. I think individuals inside of that system can do it. I think that you might find a few classrooms like David or Omar's class or the school that y'all lead, and y'all are coaching your teachers to do that, right? And that might be happening. But I think that we have to do that. I think that we can continue to push the system, but I do think that there are just things that you can do. Parents, talk to your kids. Talk to them. What is happening at school? Tell me what they said to you. Tell me about that lesson you heard. Oh, really? They used that term? That's interesting. They didn't say enslaved or slave people. They said, oh, well, there was a such thing as indentured servants, but that went away and became something else, right? You got to talk to your kids to actually hear what the indoctrination is that's happening, regardless of what type of school your kid goes to. The other thing is be ready with a counter narrative, okay? The one thing, people got a lot of jokes about Kentucky, and even though I was born in Chicago and grew up in Oakland, I lived in Kentucky for a significant portion of my life with my grandmother. And the reason why those Kentucky people so proud and all that stuff, as a child, I had history lessons on battlegrounds, you know what I'm saying, that where the Civil War took place. Like, there was a counter narrative all the time for those people. So when you go to an Afrocentric school, right, like they are always building up a counter narrative. Or it's like if David has children and his kids come home and they say something wild or whatever, or Columbus this or whatever the case is, right? Or this is good. And he got names and dates and people like, well, sit down real quick. Like, let's interrogate that a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Let's talk about it. I think the other thing is set goals for your family and stay focused on them. It's always going to be a million different problems that want your attention, right? And people will be like, Charles, can you write about this? What's your thoughts on this? What's your thoughts on that? Maybe I got thoughts on it or whatever, but the goal that I have around doing X means that I can't dedicate all of that to that space. And I feel like when you do that, encourage your kids to question weird shit. They just gonna, like, if you raise kids like that, like, we are troublemakers. The three of us are troublemakers. Listen, I know David. You know why David and me are friends? Because we get in fucking trouble with everybody all the time. Even our friends, right? We're like, why is this happening? Why is this said like this? Why didn't this happen, right? And I think that that's the type of young people that you need. That is the doorway to critical thinking. I think that we have to push that button. And if we waiting for a system to do it that don't love you, that used to own you, that took your land, that took all the credit for it, and that tells you now to shut up and you should be grateful for what the fuck I gave you, that's who you expecting to do that? Oh, you crazy as hell. And I'm not saying y'all are. I'm just saying you got to understand who you and what you dealing with. Again, we keep looking at pit bulls and expecting them to purr. And that dog just ain't gonna hunt, fam. But, you know, we can roll into y'all's reactions and roll in your final thoughts on it, man. Yeah, I know I'm long-winded. I apologize. But that's why I built the damn platform. So we can have a space to be as long-winded as we need to be.
Yeah, I think this idea of having the system work for us, I'm always, you know, I go back and forth on that. I'm looking forward to jumping in over the next couple of episodes, you know, getting into more of the specifics around the educational pieces, because I do think there's a component around identifying, developing, nurturing, and supporting more teachers of color, more Latina teachers, more African-American teachers. There's that whole body of work, retaining them in schools. We'll talk about teacher retention next time, because both Omar and I have done that work. You know, there's the leadership component, and I'm talking about like in our big district systems, right? Our big district schools, you know, making sure that we're actually represented in leadership there. That's one thread. And then the other thread is, you know, via the work that I've done and that Omar's doing to actually leverage charter schooling to actually do this work in schools that are not integrated. They are self-segregated by design to actually empower and do the self-determination work, because people have choose to come together around a particular theme or culture or idea or concept. And there's a lot of power in that. And then there's the whole world of like private schooling and homeschooling, which we may or may not get to. But I don't think there's one right or wrong answer. I think depending on the system, you know, that's where we have to we can talk about different strategies.
That's what's up. Oh,
that's pretty good, man. It's hard to follow David, dude. This guy is so smart and esoteric.
I told you to just jump in, brother. I told you. See, if you
it's hard to jump in when David's talking so well.
David,
come on, man. Come on.
Drop bombs forever, man. That dude is good.
I'm not gonna interrupt this person. So I think a couple of things, and people are wondering, what can I do? Look, first, let me just be very clear about something. When we talk about education, we talk about general public education. I have chosen to be a charter school leader because it's a vehicle and catalyst in which I think that I can create an immense amount of thought. Please do not get caught up in political bullshit between traditional schools and public schools. It's a waste of time. It's a total waste of time. You know, it isn't a waste of time. What makes for great education, period, regardless of the school. Now, my hope is that it be public so that it's free and accessible to every single student in this country. But to get marred in this like ridiculous fight is literally just an exercise of rubbernecking. Look over here so that you're not paying attention to the systemic issues going on in public education across the gamut. So that leads into my second thing. someone mentioned reading. I'm absolutely fundamentally all about literacy levels. If you're not able to read and discern critical documentation, this is how we get into problems like the subprime mortgage. This is how you get into predatory debt situations. But as important as that is, please, parents, folks in the community, teachers, all of us, teach critical thought. And you're wondering, what does that mean? It means to question where things are coming from. So today, I was just at school, and we were talking about the new CDC guideline that said if you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask indoors or outdoors, so on and so forth. And then, a colleague of mine brought up this article. It's like, oh, did you hear about I think it was the Yankees? Like 8 of them got COVID and they were all vaccinated. And you could take that story and say, oh, or you could actually critically think and say to yourself, well, did they get 2 doses of the vaccination, or are they still on their first dose? Did they get that Moderna that's 95% accurate, or did they get that Johnson & Johnson that, great, but it's 75%? You're not asking critical questions about an article, or who put out this article? What do they stand to gain from contradicting the CDC? Actually, a lot. It's a conservative news article that came out. So yeah, they're going to push against this vaccination thing because it's in their better interest to do so. That is what I'm getting at. If we're not teaching critical thought, you're going to listen to the garbage that's being peddled, not only on Facebook, but oftentimes, sadly, in like mainstream media, and you're not discerning what is right and what is wrong. You're not doing your own research. Someone said on the feed, literature, read. Yeah, read a book. Do some research and start substantiating fact with actual information instead of just some bullshit rhetoric opinion. Maybe, just maybe, if we're having civil conversations with facts, we'll actually get somewhere instead of the shouting match that we're having in this country right now.
That's what's up. David, give me your final thoughts, brother.
I don't know how to follow up on that. Yeah, I agree.
I love.
Yeah, I don't know.
New BFF thing that's emerging with you too. I love it, man.
I was dreaming there for a second. Closing thoughts, final thoughts. I also, in addition to what we're talking about and like education, different components, I want to make sure that we look hard at 2 things. Okay, we're talking about like common grounds of self-determination. So going forward in the next several shows, I want to talk about intersection points in history where Black and brown folks stood together, right, in solidarity. There are numerous examples that we know about, and so many more that we don't know about. And so let's do the work to lift those up and bring those forward to the audience. And at the same time,
give us homework, David. Give us homework.
Let's also talk about the anti-Black racism that exists in Latino culture. It's very real, right? And that's the tension, right? It's like, this is not a rosy parade. This is like real work. We're going to dig in. We're going to push. We're going to be vulnerable. And I think that's how we can hopefully create some new meaning out of this work.
Well, I appreciate you, brothers. I think this first episode was really good. And I think that, David has given us some homework. And David, you should give us things to read, and we should all go find some stuff and send it to our audience. And also just, we come and you can find videos and we'll put them up, and let's actually do that. And let's do that talking. Yeah, man, my thing is I just don't expect people that hate me to take care of me. And I think that I want to make sure I'm leaving people with tools. I'm leaving people with weapons. I'm leaving people with machetes. And as Omar said, I want to give you also the gas and the match so you can go back to that forest and light it up. I like to use certain words. I caught myself on that one, but
yourself, man.
I'm just saying, but I appreciate. Hey, yo, and it is, and I appreciate it though, man. And you can catch us. You can catch us next week at the same time. If you on the West Coast, it's 3 p.m. If you out east, it's 6 p.m. If you in Arizona, I don't know what time it is because I don't know y'all system. It's really. I love my Arizona friends. I have a lot of friends in Arizona. I just don't know y'all. Like it could be 5 o'clock somewhere, and in Arizona it's 12:53. It's not even on the hour. It's different. So, but nah, man, I'm teasing, man. You all have been listening to Common Grounds of Self-Determination with my brothers and with my friends. And if you truly enjoyed the show, the people that's watching, we need help us with sharing it. Talk about it. Ask us questions. Give us things that you want us to talk about. If some of you are a part of this and you want to be a guest, ask. Reach out. I might say no, but still ask. You know what I'm saying? If it makes sense and it works, you feel me? I think that we can make this happen, man. Thank you, J.R. Sheets, for those kind words. I hope you continue to share it, man. And, David, you got some fans today, brother. You was dropping bombs. Oh, you was dropping bombs, too. And I will work on not being as long-winded, but let's just be honest, it ain't gonna change. We will see you all on the other side, fellas. Don't leave as we close so we can recap, and we'll see y'all next time. Peace.
Thanks, everybody.